Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to show you how to paint this 10-foot painting based on a photograph that I took on a recent camping trip. As you've seen, got a big painting I'm going to be working on, so I'm just on the computer right now figuring out what to do. Sometimes I run into this issue where I have lots of photos, but they don't perfectly meet what I'm looking to paint. So in this case, I'm going to take this image and I'm going to actually turn it into something a lot more interesting. So yeah, as I was saying, in this case, this image is great, but this focal point is too centered. So I'm actually gonna move it over. I'm not gonna edit it that way. I'm just gonna do that with my mind when I'm in the studio. The other thing to keep into consideration here is what we're missing is sunlight coming down across the lake here. So I'm gonna not only move the tree over, but I'm actually gonna add a sun here and add all the sparkles leading in with a lot more highlights on these rocks, and should make it a lot more interesting. This is a great example of some of the fun stuff I get to do. It can take me a while sometimes to decide what to paint. Now that's something that you get better with as time goes on, but for me, you know, I'm quite inspired. This is a location I was at recently. I was on a big camping trip there and I had a great experience, so I should be able to portray those feelings on the painting, and we'll see how it goes. Let's get into it. So yeah, here we go. Got a big canvas behind me, and yeah, this is the image I'll be using. This is what we're working with today. So like I said, I'm going to be moving that tree, moving it over, adding a lot of sunlight. Now, when I take a look at an image like this, I'm always going to decide what my underpainting color is going to be. Now, when I look at this image, I can imagine how it's going to change with the little bit of light I'm going to add and the sunshine. So I just have to decide what color will look best showing through this painting. So I think I'm going to choose a combination of magenta, maybe a bit of yellow, and probably a little bit of turquoise just to make it a little bit more greened out. So I'm going to mix those on the canvas, and then I'm going to actually paint on top of them, and wherever that color shows through will make this painting pop when it's finished. Okay, now I got the color on the canvas. Now this is the complementary color to the predominant colors in this image. So you can imagine if you're thinking about a color wheel, red is complement to green, orange is the complement to blue. So we have a orangey red, which will complement this really nicely. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna draw this image onto the canvas, and I'm gonna use some dark paint, but I'm not gonna use black. So I'm gonna use probably a mixture of phthalo blue, and maybe some alizarin crimson and some green to kind of approximate a dark, almost black. And I'm going to use that. I'm going to mix it with a little bit of this. This is liquid light gel, which kind of thins the paint a bit. And I'm going to use that to draw it on the canvas. Now I'm going to use a tape measure. Wherever my tape measure went. I don't know where it is. But anyways, I'm going to use a tape measure actually to put the horizon line in, because I want to make sure that it's as level as possible. Because if it is out, it's really going to mess with your perception when you're looking at the image. So yeah, let's get into it. In order to paint this, we're going to use these colors. So from bottom to top, we have titanium white, cadmium yellow, cadmium red, alizarin crimson, magenta, dioxin purple, viridian green, turquoise, cerulean blue, phthalo blue, and that's liquid. That's the stuff I was telling you about. Now that we've got this laid out, you can kind of see the composition I'm going for. So I took my tape measure and I drew that line perfectly straight in parallel with the top line, used that as a measuring reference. Now, as you can see, I moved this tree over to the right. Like I said, there will be sunlight coming down the middle, and I'm going to warm up these rocks with some nice light colors. So now that this is drawn out, this is the time you need to stand back, look at it, and decide if you're happy with the composition. Now, there's a few things here that I'm not super happy with. One is the shape of this tree here. Now, I think if I kind of exaggerate the shape a bit more, it'll help to keep the interest in this area as the focal point. Also, these lines are acting as leading lines, taking you this way, so I need something to keep you in the canvas. So I'm going to draw some clouds that will kind of act as a lid to this composition. Above and beyond all that, basically the next step is we're going to take my image here, and I'm going to start with the darks and work to the lights. So I'm going to start, now that I've drawn this in, I'm going to start filling in the darkest areas with a color that's really close to being black. It's not real black because I don't want to kill the image. I don't want to have an artificial color. So it's a mixture of those reds, greens, and blues I was telling you about. And we're going to use that to draw on top of this, get into the darks, and I'm going to work from there towards the dark greens and work eventually towards the lights. So I'm going to go from dark to light. The last thing that'll go on is the highlights. And now the next day I come back to this painting, I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to do a drawing on top and I'm going to work from dark to light again. And that's how the layers progress until the detail is what I want it to be. So let's get into it. So as you can see, it's coming along nicely. We're going to work in the blues up to the highlights. And as I mentioned before, the last thing I'm going to do is the white highlights in the center and the sun. Once all the paint is on the canvas, you could consider this about halfway done because there's going to be another whole layer that needs to be done from bottom to top in order to really make this piece pop. Now the few changes I see that I'd like to make are the rocks are way too orange for my liking, so I'm going to cool them down a bit and bring in a bit more of the magentas, those kind of like granite colors. I'm also going to bring up the highlights in the trees and add a lot more detail and a lot more interesting things happening in the shadows. So that's something to pay attention to. Yeah, this piece is coming along nicely. I just worked on these rocks, these trees a bit. Now I'm going to work in the water and work upwards towards the sky. A few things I've noticed that I'm going to change. I don't like these islands that are in the distance. I think they kind of distract from the composition a bit, so I'm going to remove those. In terms of these rocks, I worked really hard on making them interesting. So something really important to think about is something that we like to call chromatic grays. So if you were to take a picture of this in black and white, a lot of these colors would appear to be the same gray. In other words, they're the same value, but I'm making them very different colors. I mean, that's a cool turquoise, that's more of a kind of a weird grayish, reddish color. Having lots of these kind of grays all mixed in make this large area a lot more interesting to the eye. And those kinds of tricks are good things you can use in all different areas, like the greens, even in the sky itself, to make them a lot more interesting and make this painting a lot more dynamic. So yeah, there you have it, finally done. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. As I mentioned, I played a lot with the different lighting and the sunshine here. I had a lot of fun with the chromatic grays in the foreground, and all in all, I'd say I'm happy with it. Typically what I would do is stand back, put my glasses on, and decide if I really think it's done or not. I did that off camera. I stepped back and I stood there, and I decided it needed a few little changes. What I did was I added these few little hits of red in here, and then I played around a little bit in the trees a bit more, and yeah, now I think I'm totally happy with it. Something important to note is when you use really thick paint in your light, it helps to really capture the light that hits the canvas in the gallery space. So the light in the foreground here is super thickly painted, and that'll help to really glow when it's in a proper environment. Conversely though, when you paint darks, you really want to use thin paint, and I typically paint them with brush strokes that go up and down because the sun doesn't reflect off of it into your eye. Other than that, yeah, I'm pretty happy with it, so let me know what you guys think, and on to the next one. See what Colleen's up to. So yeah, that's Colleen. She's the wife to be.
Hello.
So yeah, she does this kind of work. It's really detailed, as you can see. She's doing one tree at a time. It's going to be a big winter piece when it's done. This is an example of one of hers. This is a painting she did for a client. Super detailed. But yeah, check her out. Link will be in the description.